In the heart of northeast Africa, ancient Egypt emerged along the Nile, transforming desert into a cradle of civilization, where pharaohs ruled as living gods, and the river's annual floods turned barren sands into a thriving, eternal kingdom. Ancient Egypt's legacy endures in its enigmatic monuments and undeciphered secrets, where every stone and symbol invites us to question how a desert people mastered the cosmos and left mysteries that still captivate the world. The pyramids and temples of Egypt, colossal and precise, stand as timeless testaments to human ambition, built for eternity, their construction and purpose still challenging our imagination and understanding. For the Egyptians, life was a prelude to eternity. Their elaborate rituals, mummification and tombs were all part of a grand quest to secure immortality and a place among the gods. On the Giza plateau, the pyramids rise as eternal monuments to divine kingship and the ancient belief in an afterlife, their silent grandeur bridging the mortal and the divine for over 4 millennia. The northernmost and largest of the 3 Giza pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, is an undisputed masterpiece of ancient architecture and the sole surviving wonder of the ancient world. When completed around 2560 BC, it stood as the tallest man-made structure on Earth, a title it would hold for an astonishing 3,800 years. Originally clad in a smooth, polished casing of white Tura limestone, it would have gleamed brilliantly under the Egyptian sun, a dazzling beacon visible for miles around. Though the casing stones were stripped away centuries ago to build the city of Cairo, the pyramid's core structure remains a rugged testament to the ambition of its builder, the pharaoh Khufu, and the incredible skill of his architects and laborers. The statistics of the Great Pyramid are staggering and continue to baffle engineers and historians today. It is composed of an estimated 2.3 million blocks of stone, primarily limestone quarried locally on the Giza plateau, with massive granite blocks used for key structural elements inside. These blocks weigh an average of 2.5 tons each, with some of the granite beams in the king's chamber weighing up to 80 tons. The precision with which this colossal structure was built is just as impressive as its scale. The base is an almost perfect square, with its 4 sides aligned with breathtaking accuracy to the 4 cardinal points of the compass, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and surveying. The construction of such a monument in the Bronze Age presents a profound enigma. The ancient Egyptians lacked iron tools, wheels for transport of heavy loads, and modern lifting equipment. Yet they managed to quarry, shape, transport and lift millions of tons of stone to a height of over 146 meters or 481 feet. The logistical challenge alone is mind-boggling, requiring the organization and sustenance of a massive workforce over a period of approximately 20 years. The project would have necessitated an army of skilled craftsmen, surveyors, masons and laborers, all working in concert under the direction of a master architect who possessed a level of knowledge that we are still struggling to fully comprehend. This monument was far more than a simple tomb. It was a symbol of the pharaoh's supreme power and his divine status. It represented the primordial mound, the Ghats, from which the ancient Egyptians believed all life emerged at the dawn of creation. By constructing this artificial mountain of stone, Khufu was not only creating a secure and eternal house for his body, but was also ensuring his own rebirth and ascension to the heavens. The Great Pyramid is the ultimate expression of the Old Kingdom's worldview, a physical manifestation of their quest for order, stability and immortality, built with a level of precision and on a scale that has never been surpassed. The most enduring mystery of the Great Pyramid is not its purpose, but its construction. How did a civilization with relatively simple tools accomplish one of the most ambitious engineering feats in human history? For decades, the prevailing theory has centered on the use of massive ramps. Scholars have proposed various models, including a long, straight ramp extending from a quarry to the pyramid, a spiral ramp that corkscrewed around the exterior of the structure as it grew, or an internal ramp system built within the pyramid's core. Each theory has its merits and its flaws. A straight ramp, for instance, would have eventually become impractically long and would have required a volume of material almost equal to the pyramid itself. A more recent and compelling hypothesis, supported by archaeological findings, suggests the use of a combination of ramp systems. A large external ramp may have been used for the lower, broader sections of the pyramid where the majority of the blocks were placed. For the upper, steeper levels, a more sophisticated internal ramp or a series of shorter, zigzagging ramps might have been employed. Evidence from papyri discovered at the ancient Red Sea port of Wadi al-Jaf describes the logistics of transporting high-quality Tura limestone to Giza, confirming a highly organized, state-run operation. These documents provide a rare glimpse into the meticulous planning and management that underpinned the entire pyramid-building process, even if they don't fully solve the lifting question. Beyond the ramps, the sheer human power involved is difficult to overstate. The notion of vast armies of slaves being driven by cruel taskmasters, popularized by Hollywood films, has been largely debunked by archaeological evidence. Excavations of a workers' village and cemetery near the pyramids have revealed that the builders were skilled, paid Egyptian laborers. They were well fed, receiving daily rations of bread, beer and meat, and had access to medical care as evidenced by skeletons with healed bone fractures. These were not slaves but dedicated workers, likely organized into competing teams, who took pride in their sacred task of building the pharaoh's eternal home, working for Khufu's horizon. The methods for lifting the colossal granite beams, especially those weighing over 50 tons that form the roof of the king's chamber, remain a subject of intense debate. It is likely that ancient engineers employed a sophisticated understanding of leverage, using wooden sledges, ropes, and a vast system of counterweights and pulleys. They may have built temporary wooden cranes or lifting devices at the construction site. The process was undoubtedly slow, methodical, and incredibly dangerous, requiring immense coordination and ingenuity. The construction of the pyramid was not a single simple technique, but a complex series of evolving solutions, a testament to the remarkable problem-solving abilities of the ancient Egyptian engineers. While the exterior of the Great Pyramid is a monument to scale and precision, its interior is honestly a labyrinth of passages and chambers that just deepens its mystery. Unlike later pyramids, which had simpler internal layouts, Khufu's pyramid features a complex and unique arrangement of corridors and rooms at different levels within its massive structure. The original entrance, located on the north face, leads into the descending passage, a narrow corridor that slopes down into the bedrock beneath the pyramid, terminating in an unfinished subterranean chamber. The purpose of this rough-hewn room remains unknown. Some speculate it was the original burial chamber before a change in plans, while others believe it served a symbolic, perhaps mythological purpose. Partway down the descending passage, a concealed opening leads upwards into the ascending passage. This corridor, once blocked by massive granite plugs, slopes steeply upwards into the heart of the pyramid. It represents a significant change in the internal design and leads to the two main upper chambers. The first of these is a horizontal passage leading to the so-called Queen's Chamber. This room, located exactly in the center of the pyramid's north-south axis, is misnamed, as it was almost certainly not intended for a queen. Its gabled limestone roof is a masterpiece of masonry, and two mysterious narrow shafts extend from its north and south walls, stopping before they reach the outside, their true purpose still a puzzle for Egyptologists. The highlight of the pyramid's interior is the breathtaking Grand Gallery, a long corbelled corridor that continues the upward slope of the ascending passage. With its soaring high ceiling, it is an architectural marvel in its own right. The walls rise in 7 stepped layers, each one slightly overlapping the one below, creating a tall, narrow space that builds a sense of anticipation and grandeur. The function of the Grand Gallery is debated. Some believe it was simply a magnificent passageway, while others suggest it was used to store the massive granite blocks that were used to seal the ascending passage after the king's burial, a kind of internal slide for the sealing stones. At the top of the Grand Gallery lies the final destination, the king's chamber. This stark rectangular room is built entirely of massive, precisely cut blocks of red granite transported from the quarries of Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. It houses a single, lidless granite sarcophagus, which is larger than the entrance to the chamber, indicating it must have been placed there during construction. Above the king's chamber are 5 relieving chambers designed to distribute the immense weight of the pyramid's core and prevent the burial chamber's flat ceiling from collapsing. These hidden rooms, not meant to be seen, contain the only markings in the entire pyramid that name Khufu, scrawled by the work gangs who built them. Standing proudly in the center of the Giza Plateau is the second Great Pyramid, built for Khufu's son and successor, Pharaoh Khafre. Although it is slightly smaller than the Great Pyramid of his father, it appears taller from certain angles because it was built on a higher point of the plateau. The Pyramid of Khafre is unique because a significant portion of its original polished white limestone casing remains intact at its apex. This cap of smooth stone offers a tantalizing glimpse of how all the pyramids would have originally appeared, their surfaces gleaming like polished jewels under the bright Egyptian sun. A truly breathtaking sight that has been lost to time for the other monuments. Khafre's pyramid complex is the most complete surviving example from the Old Kingdom. It includes a well-preserved mortuary temple at the pyramid's eastern base, constructed from massive megalithic blocks of limestone. A long, covered causeway over 490 meters in length connects this temple to the Valley Temple further down the plateau. This Valley Temple, built of enormous limestone core blocks faced with polished red granite, is a marvel of ancient construction. Inside, its grand pillared hall once housed magnificent statues of the pharaoh, including the famous diorite statue of Khafre with the falcon god Horus protecting the back of his head, now a centerpiece of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Guarding this entire monumental complex is arguably the most enigmatic sculpture in the world, the Great Sphinx. Carved from a single, massive outcrop of limestone bedrock left over from the quarrying of stone for the Great Pyramid, it is a truly colossal figure. Measuring 73 meters long and 20 meters high, it depicts a mythical creature with the reclining body of a lion and the head of a human, believed to be a portrait of the pharaoh Khafre himself. The Sphinx faces due east, its gaze fixed on the rising sun, symbolizing its role as a guardian of the necropolis and a manifestation of the king's divine power and connection to the sun god, Ra-Horakhti. The mysteries surrounding the Sphinx are as deep as those of the pyramids. While most Egyptologists attribute it to Khafre, some geologists have pointed to erosion patterns on its body, suggesting evidence of significant rainfall, which would date the statue to a much earlier prehistoric period. This theory remains highly controversial, but adds to the aura of mystique that surrounds the monument. For thousands of years, the Sphinx has stared silently into the eternity of the desert, its purpose and true age debated, its weathered face holding secrets that we may never fully uncover, a timeless riddle carved in stone. The southernmost and smallest of the 3 main Giza pyramids belongs to Pharaoh Menkaure, the son of Khafre and grandson of Khufu. Though it stands at a mere 65 meters high, less than half the height of the Great Pyramid, it is a remarkable monument in its own right and adds a crucial final element to the iconic Giza skyline. The decision to build a significantly smaller pyramid may reflect a shift in religious priorities, with more resources being dedicated to the cult of the sun god Ra and the construction of sun temples. Or it could simply indicate a decline in the economic resources available to the king compared to his powerful predecessors. Despite its smaller size, the Pyramid of Menkaure was distinguished by its lavish and unique construction. The lower 16 courses of the pyramid were originally cased not in the typical white limestone, but in massive, rough-hewn blocks of red granite brought all the way from the distant quarries of Aswan. This would have given the pyramid a striking two-toned appearance with a rugged red granite base and a smooth white limestone top. The use of this incredibly hard and difficult-to-work stone on such a large scale was a statement of royal power and wealth. A large gash on the pyramid's north face, the result of a failed attempt to dismantle it in the 12th century AD, reveals the incredible solidity of its granite construction. The Mortuary Temple of Menkaure, located at the pyramid's eastern face, tells a story of rushed completion. The initial foundations were laid with enormous limestone blocks similar to those in Khafre's temple, but the structure was hastily finished using cheaper mud brick, likely after the pharaoh's premature death. It was within this temple and the associated valley temple that archaeologists discovered a treasure trove of magnificent sculptures. These include the famous triad statues depicting Menkaure standing alongside the goddess Hathor and various local deities, showcasing the sublime artistry of the Old Kingdom and providing invaluable insight into the king's relationship with the divine pantheon of his time. Like the other pyramids, Menkaure's was not a solitary monument. It was the centerpiece of a complex that included 3 smaller Queen's pyramids to its south. These subsidiary pyramids, though much smaller, are architecturally significant and were likely intended for Menkaure's principal wives. The Giza Plateau, therefore, is not just a collection of 3 famous monuments, but a dynastic story told in stone. From the colossal ambition of Khufu to the slightly more modest but still imposing pyramid of Khafre, and finally to the smaller jewel-like pyramid of Menkaure, the site chronicles the evolution of a dynasty and its changing fortunes over 3 generations of powerful kings. While the 3 great pyramids of the pharaohs dominate the Giza Plateau, the necropolis is actually a far more complex and populated city of the dead. Clustered around the monumental tombs of the kings are numerous smaller pyramids, commonly known as the Queen's Pyramids. To the east of the Great Pyramid of Khufu lie 3 such structures, laid out in a neat row. These were built for his mother, Hetepheres I, and 2 of his principal wives. The tomb of Hetepheres, rediscovered in 1925, was found to contain a spectacular collection of funerary furniture, including a gilded bed and carrying chair. But her sarcophagus was mysteriously empty, adding another layer to the Giza puzzles. Similarly, a single subsidiary pyramid stands beside the Pyramid of Khafre, and 3 more are aligned to the south of Menkaure's pyramid. These smaller structures mimic the form of the Great Pyramids, but on a much reduced scale. They were essential components of the royal burial, ensuring that the king's closest family members could accompany him on his journey into the afterlife and maintain the royal court's structure in eternity. These pyramids had their own small chapels for offerings, reinforcing the idea that the entire plateau was a functional ritual landscape designed to serve the needs of the deceased royals for all time, a permanent reflection of the earthly court. Spreading out from the pyramids in organized grid-like patterns are the vast cemeteries of Mastabas, the final resting places for the extended royal family, high officials, priests and architects who served the pharaohs. The word mastaba comes from the Arabic word for bench, describing their rectangular, flat-topped shape with sloping sides. These tombs were arranged in streets, creating a true city of the dead. The Western Cemetery, located to the west of Khufu's pyramid, is the largest, containing the tombs of the most powerful nobles and administrators of the 4th dynasty. Their proximity to the king's pyramid was a mark of supreme honor and status. Inside these mastabas, life was meant to continue. The subterranean burial chambers housed the deceased's mummy, while the superstructure above contained a chapel or offering room. The walls of these chapels were often exquisitely decorated with vibrant, detailed reliefs depicting scenes from daily life: farming, boating on the Nile, hunting and feasting. These were not just decorations, they were magical scenes intended to provide the deceased with everything they needed to sustain their spirit or kai for eternity. Exploring these mastaba fields provides a rich, detailed counterpoint to the silent grandeur of the pyramids, offering a vivid window into the lives, beliefs and aspirations of the elite society of ancient Egypt. To view the pyramids of Giza as merely elaborate tombs is to miss their profound spiritual and cosmological significance. In the minds of the ancient Egyptians, these structures were far more than burial markers. They were powerful resurrection machines, cosmic engines meticulously designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transformation and ascension into the heavens. The pyramid's shape itself was deeply symbolic. It represented the primeval mound, the first land to emerge from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time, a place of creation and rebirth. By burying the king within such a structure, the Egyptians were placing him at the very source of creation, ensuring his successful rebirth into the afterlife. The pyramid's form also acted as a symbolic stairway or ramp to the heavens. Its sloping sides were seen as solidified rays of the sun, providing a physical pathway for the king's soul to ascend and join the sun god Ra on his daily journey across the sky. This connection is reinforced by the pyramid texts, the earliest religious writings in the world, which were inscribed inside later Old Kingdom pyramids. These texts contained spells explicitly stating the king's destiny to ascend to the sky and join the imperishable stars in the northern heavens. The precise alignment of the pyramids to the cardinal points and certain celestial bodies was therefore essential to the functioning of this cosmic engine. The entire Giza complex was designed to be a stage for this transformation. The journey of the king's body mirrored his spiritual journey from the Valley Temple, symbolizing the mortal world, up the causeway to the Mortuary Temple, where purification rituals were performed, and finally into the pyramid itself, the vessel for his metamorphosis. The daily rituals performed by priests in the temples were not just acts of remembrance, they were vital for sustaining the king's spirit and ensuring the continued stability and prosperity of the entire kingdom. The deceased pharaoh, having become a god, played an active role in maintaining Maat, the divine cosmic order. Therefore, the pyramids of Giza are the ultimate expression of the ancient Egyptian worldview, where architecture, religion, and astronomy were inextricably linked. They are monuments built not out of vanity, but out of a profound faith in a cyclical universe of death and rebirth. They represent a monumental effort by an entire civilization to conquer mortality and ensure the eternal continuity of divine kingship. As we gaze upon these man-made mountains of stone, we are looking at the physical embodiment of a belief system, a powerful testament to the human quest for immortality and our enduring desire to find meaning in the cosmos. While the pyramids stand as eternal monuments to the afterlife of kings, the temples of ancient Egypt were the vibrant, beating heart of its living society. These were not simply places for quiet prayer or personal devotion, as we might imagine a temple today. They were sprawling, dynamic institutions that functioned as the epicenters of religion, politics, economy, and culture. The great temples were considered the literal homes of the gods on earth, sacred domains where the divine and mortal realms could intersect under carefully controlled circumstances. The well-being of the entire nation was believed to depend on the proper functioning of these sacred estates and the correct performance of the rituals conducted within their hallowed walls. The pharaoh, as the chief high priest of every cult in the land, was the essential link between humanity and the gods. It was his duty to build and maintain their temples, honoring them with lavish offerings to ensure they would uphold Maat, the divine order and balance of the cosmos. In practice, the king delegated these daily duties to a powerful and educated priesthood who acted on his behalf. These priests were not just spiritual leaders, they were administrators, scholars, astronomers, and physicians. They managed the temple's vast economic assets, which included enormous tracts of agricultural land, herds of livestock, fleets of boats, and workshops filled with skilled artisans, making the temples the most powerful economic engines in the kingdom. The design of an Egyptian temple was a symbolic representation of the universe at the moment of creation. The outer walls and massive pylon gateways separated the sacred ordered space within from the chaotic, unordered world outside. As one moved deeper into the temple, the floor would rise slightly and the ceilings would lower, creating a sense of progressing towards a more intimate and sacred space. The journey culminated in the dark Holy of Holies, the sanctuary where the cult statue of the god resided. This inner sanctum was the most sacred place in Egypt, accessible only to the highest-ranking priests and the pharaoh himself, the point where the god's spirit was believed to physically manifest. Therefore, the temples were the pillars that supported the entire edifice of Egyptian civilization. They were repositories of knowledge, centers of artistic excellence, and major employers that drove the national economy. The intricate carvings that covered every surface were not mere decoration. They were a visual library of history, mythology, and royal propaganda, reinforcing the king's divine right to rule and the eternal bond between Egypt and its gods. To walk through the ruins of these great temples is to walk through the very soul of ancient Egypt, to witness the fusion of faith, power, and art that defined this extraordinary culture for millennia. On the east bank of the Nile, at what is now Luxor, on the site of ancient Thebes, stands the largest religious complex ever built, the Temple of Karnak. Now, this wasn't just a single temple, but rather a vast, sprawling city of sanctuaries, pylons, chapels, and obelisks, mainly dedicated to the Theban triad of gods, Amun-Ra, his consort Mut, and their son Khonsu. For well over 2,000 years, from the Middle Kingdom right up to the Ptolemaic period, nearly every pharaoh wanted to leave their mark here, adding new monuments and expanding the complex. The result is, honestly, a bewildering and awe-inspiring architectural tapestry, a historical document written in stone that tells the story of Egypt's changing fortunes and evolving religious beliefs. The sheer scale of Karnak is almost impossible to wrap your head around. The main precinct, which is dedicated to the supreme state god Amun-Ra, covers more than 250 acres. That's actually big enough to fit 10 average-sized European cathedrals. Walking its central axis is like taking a journey through time, moving through a series of 10 massive pylons, or monumental gateways, each one built by a different pharaoh. These towering structures weren't just for show. They served as symbolic gates and defensive walls covered in reliefs showing the king as a triumphant warrior, defeating Egypt's enemies and keeping cosmic order intact. The whole complex was a living, breathing entity, always growing and changing with each new reign. At its heart lies the sacred lake, a large rectangular body of water that symbolized the primeval waters of creation known as Nun. Here, priests would perform ritual purification before carrying out their sacred duties. The lake was also used for divine processions, where ceremonial barks carrying the images of the gods would float during religious festivals. The water for the lake came straight from the Nile, brought in through underground channels, just another reminder of the deep connection between the temple, the river, and the creation myths at the heart of Egyptian belief. The presence of the lake really underscored the temple's role as a microcosm of the universe. Karnak was, in many ways, the Vatican of its time, the most powerful and wealthy religious center in all of Egypt. The high priest here was a figure of enormous influence, second only to the pharaoh himself. The temple's treasury, known as the House of Silver, controlled vast resources, receiving tribute from conquered lands and donations from the king. This immense wealth didn't just fund the temple's ongoing construction projects, it also supported expeditions, military campaigns, and the administration of the state. Karnak was much more than a place of worship. It was the spiritual and economic powerhouse that fueled the golden age of the New Kingdom and helped define the identity of the Egyptian empire. Within the immense precinct of Amun-Ra at Karnak lies what is honestly its most breathtaking feature, the Great Hypostyle Hall. This architectural wonder, located between the second and third pylons, is like a forest made of stone, a vast chamber filled with 134 colossal sandstone columns that once supported a massive roof, now long gone. The sheer density and scale of these columns create a feeling of wonder and humility that's hard to describe. Walking among them feels like stepping into another world, a sacred grove where the light filters down from above, casting a mystical, almost otherworldly atmosphere. The hall was designed to inspire awe, to make anyone who entered feel the immense power of the gods and the pharaoh who built in their name. The layout is divided into a central nave and two side aisles. The 12 columns of the central nave are the largest, soaring up to 21 meters high and topped with massive papyrus flower-shaped capitals. representing the towering marsh plants of the primeval swamp of creation. The 122 smaller columns in the side aisles, standing at about 13 meters high, are topped with closed-bud papyrus capitals. This difference in height allowed for clerestory windows to be built along the central axis, letting shafts of natural light cut through the deep gloom of the hall, illuminating the central processional path while leaving the side areas in sacred shadow. Every available surface of the columns, walls and architraves in the great Hypostyle hall is covered with meticulously carved hieroglyphs and religious scenes. These aren't just random decorations, they form a complex theological narrative. The reliefs show the pharaohs who built the hall, mainly Seti I and his son Ramses II, making offerings to the gods and performing sacred rituals. These scenes had a magical purpose, ensuring that the king's pious acts would be carried out for all eternity, sustaining the gods and guaranteeing the stability of the universe. The hall is, in a way, a library of royal devotion. Its stone pages filled with the prayers and propaganda of the new kingdom's most powerful rulers. The construction of the Hypostyle hall was an engineering achievement on par with the pyramids. Quarrying, transporting and erecting these massive stone drum sections to create the columns required incredible skill and organization. The architects and builders had to work with amazing precision to ensure the stability of the structure and the perfect alignment of every element. The hall was intended to be a model of the cosmos, a man-made marsh of creation through which the sacred bark of Amun would pass during festival processions. It stands today as one of the most magnificent architectural achievements of the ancient world, a true testament to the boundless ambition and deep faith of the pharaohs. Just a few kilometers south of Karnak, once connected to it by a grand processional way, stands the Luxor Temple. Unlike Karnak, which was dedicated to the worship of a divine triad and served as the site of continuous construction by dozens of pharaohs, Luxor Temple had a more specific and focused purpose. It wasn't really a place for the worship of a particular god, but rather a sacred stage for the rites of kingship and the celebration of the Opet festival, one of the most important religious ceremonies of the New Kingdom. The temple is dedicated to the rejuvenation of the king, serving as the place where the pharaoh's divine nature and his connection to the creator god Amun would be renewed each year. The layout of the temple reflects its ceremonial function. Its main axis isn't perfectly straight, but bends slightly, a result of being built and added to by different pharaohs, most notably Amenhotep III and Ramses II. The original core of the temple, built by Amenhotep III, is a masterpiece of New Kingdom elegance and proportion, featuring graceful papyrus bundle columns and finely executed reliefs. Generations later, Ramses the Great added a massive outer court, a new pylon and two towering obelisks, dramatically altering the temple's entrance and stamping his own colossal mark on the sacred site. This blend of architectural styles really tells the story of the temple's long and evolving history. The entrance to Luxor Temple today is dominated by the massive first pylon of Ramses II, its outer face covered with dramatic reliefs celebrating his supposed victory at the Battle of Kadesh. In front of this pylon originally stood two colossal seated statues of Ramses and two magnificent red granite obelisks. Today, only one of the obelisks remains. Its twin has stood in the Place de la Concorde in Paris since 1836. A gift to France from Egypt in the 19th century. The surviving obelisk and statues still create an imposing entryway, designed to impress upon all who entered the divine power and military might of the pharaoh. But the true purpose of Luxor Temple was realized during the annual Opet festival. During this grand celebration, the cult statues of Amun, Mut and Khonsu would be placed in sacred barks and carried in a great procession from their home at Karnak to Luxor Temple. This journey symbolized the visit of Amun-Ra of Karnak to the Amun of Luxor. Inside the temple, secret rituals were performed in the inner sanctuaries, culminating in a mystical union between the god and the pharaoh. This ceremony was believed to renew the king's divine powers, reaffirming his legitimacy as the son of Amun and the rightful ruler of Egypt, thus ensuring the continued fertility and prosperity of the land for another year. The grand temples of Karnak and Luxor, they weren't isolated entities. They were actually two parts of a single integrated sacred landscape, linked by a magnificent ceremonial road known as the Avenue of Sphinxes. This sacred pathway, stretching for nearly 3 kilometers, so almost 2 miles, provided the physical and symbolic route for the great processions of the Opet festival. As the cult statues of the Theban gods traveled from Karnak to Luxor, they moved along this grand avenue, which was lined on both sides with hundreds of stone sphinxes standing as silent eternal guardians of the sacred journey. Walking this path was a deeply spiritual experience, a transition from one holy site to another along a divinely protected route. The construction of this monumental avenue was actually undertaken by several pharaohs over many centuries, which really is a testament to its enduring importance. The section closest to Luxor Temple was built by Nectanebo I of the 30th dynasty and features classic human-headed sphinxes. As the avenue approaches the Great Temple of Karnak, the form of the sphinxes changes. Here they are criosphinxes, creatures with the reclining body of a lion but the head of a ram, an animal sacred to the god Amun-Ra. These powerful symbols serve to protect the processional way and to honor the great god of Thebes, whose temple complex they led to. In total, it's estimated that over 1,350 sphinxes once lined the entire length of the avenue. For centuries, much of the Avenue of Sphinxes was buried beneath the modern city of Luxor, with houses, shops and mosques built directly on top of the ancient road. In the early 21st century, the Egyptian government undertook a massive and ambitious project to excavate and restore the entire length of the avenue. This involved the careful relocation of thousands of residents and the painstaking archaeological work of uncovering and reassembling the sphinxes, many of which were broken or had been moved over the millennia. The project was a monumental undertaking, aimed at reviving one of the most significant features of ancient Thebes for both scholars and the public. In 2021, the fully restored Avenue of Sphinxes was officially reopened with a spectacular celebration designed to echo the ancient Opet festival. This grand event, complete with processions, music and light, brought the sacred pathway back to life, allowing modern visitors to experience a sense of the grandeur that once defined this religious capital. The reopened avenue is more than just an archaeological marvel. It's a direct physical link to the spiritual world of the ancient Egyptians, a tangible reminder of the deep connections they forged between their gods, their king, and the very landscape they inhabited. It is a road that truly bridges the past and the present. Across the Nile from Luxor, nestled against the base of the sheer limestone cliffs of the Theban necropolis, lies one of the most visually stunning architectural achievements of ancient Egypt, the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari. Unlike the massive, sprawling complexes of Karnak and Luxor, Hatshepsut's temple is a monument of striking elegance, harmony, and, honestly, modernity. It is a terraced temple, with 3 broad, colonnaded levels rising from the desert floor and connected by long ramps. The temple's clean lines and light-filled porticos stand in dramatic contrast to the rugged, sun-baked cliffs that form its natural backdrop, creating a breathtaking fusion of man-made structure and natural landscape. The temple, which Hatshepsut named Djeser Djeseru, or Holiest of Holies, was designed by her royal architect and confidant, Senenmut. Its design was inspired by the neighboring mortuary temple of the Middle Kingdom pharaoh Mentuhotep II, but Senenmut expanded and refined the concept, creating a structure of unparalleled grace. The wide terraces were once lush gardens filled with exotic incense trees brought back from a famous expedition to the distant land of Punt. The temple was not just a place for Hatshepsut's mortuary cult, but also a sanctuary dedicated to the god Amun, who she claimed as her divine father, and the goddess Hathor, mistress of the West. The colonnades of the temple serve as a canvas for some of the most beautiful and informative reliefs of the New Kingdom. Unlike the typical scenes of warfare and conquest that dominate other royal monuments, the reliefs at Deir el-Bahari tell a story. The most famous of these is the Punt Colonnade, which depicts in vivid detail Hatshepsut's great trading expedition to the fabled land of Punt, likely modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. The carvings show Egyptian ships being loaded with exotic goods, including incense, ebony, ivory, gold and live myrrh trees, which were then successfully replanted on the temple's terraces, a remarkable achievement in ancient horticulture. Another series of reliefs in what is known as the birth colonnade tells the story of Hatshepsut's divine conception and birth. In these scenes, the god Amun is shown taking the form of her father, Thutmose I, to impregnate her mother, Queen Amos. This elaborate narrative was a crucial piece of political propaganda, designed to legitimize her unconventional reign as a female pharaoh. The temple as a whole is therefore a masterwork of self-presentation, a monument that uses sublime architecture and sophisticated art to justify a woman's claim to the throne and to secure her eternal legacy as one of Egypt's most successful and ambitious rulers. The story behind the magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahari is as remarkable as the structure itself. It is the story of Hatshepsut, one of the most powerful and enigmatic women in ancient history. Originally the wife and half-sister of the pharaoh Thutmose II, she became regent for her young stepson Thutmose III after her husband's early death. But Hatshepsut was not content to rule from the shadows. After a few years, she took the unprecedented step of having herself crowned pharaoh, adopting the full royal titulary and ruling Egypt in her own right for over 2 decades during a period of great peace and prosperity in the 18th dynasty. To legitimize her rule in a deeply patriarchal society, Hatshepsut skillfully used propaganda and ideology. She had herself depicted in statues and reliefs with all the traditional symbols of male kingship, including the false beard, the royal kilt, and the muscular physique of a male pharaoh. While some early depictions show her with feminine features, over time her official image became almost entirely masculine, a deliberate political strategy to conform to the established iconography of power. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari was a key part of this campaign, with its reliefs emphasizing her divine parentage and her legitimate claim to the throne as the chosen heir of the god Amun. Hatshepsut's reign was not marked by military conquest, but by economic prosperity, architectural innovation, and ambitious trade missions. Her famous expedition to Punt re-established trade routes that had been dormant for centuries, bringing immense wealth and exotic goods into Egypt. She was a prolific builder, commissioning hundreds of construction projects throughout Egypt and Nubia, including the erection of 2 massive red granite obelisks at the Temple of Karnak, one of which still stands today as the tallest in Egypt. Her focus on trade and construction ushered in an era of stability and artistic flourishing that defined the early New Kingdom. The end of Hatshepsut's story is shrouded in mystery. Some 20 years after her death, her stepson Thutmose III, who had grown to become a great military pharaoh in his own right, began a systematic campaign to erase her from history. Her name and image were chiseled off monuments, her statues were smashed and buried, and her name was omitted from official king lists. The reasons for this posthumous persecution are still debated by scholars. It may have been an act of personal revenge or a political move to restore the traditional male line of succession. For centuries, her reign was forgotten until modern archaeologists pieced together the clues and restored this remarkable woman to her rightful place in history. Far to the south of Thebes, in the remote lands of Nubia, lies one of the most awe-inspiring monuments of the ancient world, the great rock-cut temples of Abu Simbel. Carved directly into the face of a solid rock mountain during the reign of the legendary pharaoh Ramses II, these temples are an audacious statement of royal power and divine authority. The great temple is dedicated to Ramses himself, who is shown as a deified being alongside the 3 principal state gods of the time, Amun-Ra of Thebes, Ptah of Memphis, and Ra-Horakhti of Heliopolis. It was honestly a masterpiece of propaganda, designed to intimidate and impress the Nubians and to project Egyptian power deep into its southern territories. The facade of the Great Temple is one of the most iconic images of ancient Egypt. 4 colossal statues of Ramses the Great, each over 20 meters high, are carved into the cliff face. They show the pharaoh seated on his throne, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, his expression serene and all-powerful. Even though one of the statues collapsed in antiquity, The sheer scale and majesty of the remaining figures are, well, just overwhelming. At the feet of these giants are smaller statues depicting Ramses' mother, his wife Nefertari, and several of his many children, emphasizing the dynastic power and fertility of the king. Inside the temple, the visitor is plunged into a man-made cavern of colossal proportions. The first great hall is supported by 8 massive pillars, each one carved in the form of a standing mummified Ramses, again reinforcing the pharaoh's divine status. The walls are covered with breathtakingly detailed reliefs that celebrate Ramses' military achievements, most notably the Battle of Kadesh. These dramatic scenes show the pharaoh as a heroic warrior, single-handedly charging into his enemies and securing a great victory for Egypt. While historical records suggest the battle was more of a stalemate, the reliefs at Abu Simbel present the official divinely sanctioned version of events for all eternity. A short distance away, Ramses commissioned a second, smaller temple, also carved into the rock. This temple is dedicated to the goddess Hathor and to Ramses' most beloved wife, Queen Nefertari. Its facade features 6 standing statues, 4 of Ramses and 2 of Nefertari, all of equal height. This was an extraordinary honor for a queen, demonstrating the deep affection and high esteem in which Ramses held Nefertari. The inscription on the temple reads, "Ramses, he who has made a temple excavated in the mountain of eternal workmanship, for the great royal wife Nefertari, beloved of Mut, for whom the sun does shine. It is a lasting monument to both royal power and royal love." Beyond its colossal scale and artistic grandeur, the Great Temple at Abu Simbel holds a remarkable secret, a testament to the extraordinary precision of ancient Egyptian astronomers and architects. The entire temple was meticulously oriented so that twice a year, on dates currently falling around February 22nd and October 22nd, a phenomenon known as the solar alignment occurs. On these 2 days, the first rays of the rising sun penetrate the darkness of the temple, shining deep into the mountain through the main entrance and all the way down the 65-meter-long corridor to illuminate the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. This inner sanctuary, located at the very back of the temple, contains 4 seated statues carved from the rock, the gods Ra-Horakhti, Amun-Ra, the deified Ramses II, and Ptah. As the sunlight streams into this sacred space, it bathes the statues of Ra-Horakhti, Amun-Ra, and Ramses in its golden glow. This was a powerful symbolic event, representing the divine energy of the sun god, revitalizing the statues of the other gods and, most importantly, the divine image of the pharaoh himself. It was a yearly moment of cosmic rebirth for the king, a reaffirmation of his status as the son of the sun god. Significantly, the 4th statue in the sanctuary, that of Ptah, the god of the underworld and creation, remains shrouded in shadow. Because of his association with the realm of darkness and the dead, he was never to be touched by the light of the sun. The fact that the ancient architects could calculate the solar angles with such incredible precision as to illuminate 3 statues while leaving the 4th in darkness is a stunning demonstration of their sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge. This biannual event was a piece of sacred theatre, a miracle designed to showcase the pharaoh's intimate connection with the cosmic forces that governed the universe. The original dates of this alignment were likely chosen to commemorate significant events in Ramses' life, such as his birthday and his coronation day. When the temple was relocated in the 1960s to save it from the rising waters of Lake Nasser, engineers worked painstakingly to replicate this ancient alignment. Despite using the most advanced technology available, the dates of the modern alignment are shifted by 1 day from the original. This slight discrepancy only serves to highlight the almost unbelievable precision achieved by the ancient builders thousands of years ago using only simple tools and their profound understanding of the heavens. Floating serenely in the Nile River between the old and new Aswan dams is the beautiful island temple of Philae, often called the Pearl of Egypt. This temple complex, primarily dedicated to the goddess Isis, represents the final chapter in the long and glorious history of ancient Egyptian religion. While its foundations date back earlier, most of the structures seen today were built during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. from the 3rd century BC to the 3rd century AD. Philae was one of the last places in Egypt where the ancient gods were worshipped, a bastion of the old faith that survived for centuries after Christianity had swept across the rest of the country. The temple's picturesque setting on an island gave it a unique and magical atmosphere. The main temple of Isis is a harmonious blend of traditional Egyptian pharaonic architecture and later Greco-Roman influences. Its grand pylons, colonnaded courtyards, and dark sanctuary follow the classic Egyptian temple plan. However, the capitals of the columns show a new variety and floral exuberance characteristic of the later periods. The temple was the center of the cult of Isis, one of Egypt's most beloved and enduring deities, worshipped as the divine mother, wife, and a powerful magician who had resurrected her husband, Osiris. Philae became a site of pilgrimage for people from all over the Mediterranean world. The cult of Isis was immensely popular during the Roman era, and her worship spread as far as Britain and the Black Sea. Pilgrims would travel to Philae to seek the goddess's healing powers and to witness her sacred mysteries. The last known hieroglyphic inscription in Egypt was carved on the gateway of Hadrian at Philae in 394 AD, and the last demotic graffiti dates to 452 AD. For more than a century after the official closure of pagan temples by the Roman Empire, the worship of Isis secretly persisted here, a final flickering flame of a faith that had endured for over 3 millennia. One of the most charming structures at Philae is the unfinished kiosk of Trajan. This elegant, open-sided pavilion with its 14 massive columns and intricately carved floral capitals was intended to be the formal entrance to the temple complex. Though its roof was never completed, it has become one of the most iconic symbols of Philae, its graceful form perfectly complementing the surrounding water and rocky landscape. The entire island complex is a testament to the resilience of ancient Egyptian culture and its ability to adapt and thrive even under foreign rule, standing as a beautiful and poignant final monument to the gods of the Nile. The serene beauty of the temples at Philae and the colossal majesty of Abu Simbel were almost lost forever in the mid-20th century. The construction of the Aswan High Dam, designed to control the Nile's floods and generate hydroelectricity for modern Egypt, created a vast reservoir known as Lake Nasser. The rising waters of this new lake threatened to submerge these irreplaceable ancient monuments completely and permanently. The world was faced with the prospect of losing 2 of humanity's greatest cultural treasures beneath the waves, a potential tragedy that spurred one of the most ambitious and honestly unprecedented international collaborations in history. In 1960, Egypt and Sudan appealed to UNESCO for help, launching a global campaign to save the monuments of Nubia. The response was overwhelming. 50 countries contributed funding, expertise, and technology to the monumental rescue effort. The campaign was a landmark moment in global heritage preservation, establishing the principle that certain cultural sites are part of the common heritage of all humanity, and that the international community has a shared responsibility to protect them. It was a race against time, as engineers and archaeologists worked tirelessly while the waters of Lake Nasser steadily rose behind the newly completed dam. The rescue of the Abu Simbel temples, which took place between 1964 and 1968, was an engineering marvel. The 2 rock-cut temples could not simply be moved. They had to be painstakingly cut away from the mountain. A massive cofferdam was first built to protect the site from the rising water. Then the temples were carefully sawn into more than 1,000 massive blocks, some weighing up to 30 tons. These blocks were then lifted and transported to a new, higher location 65 meters above and 200 meters back from their original site. There they were meticulously reassembled against the backdrop of a specially constructed man-made mountain, a hollow concrete dome designed to replicate the original cliff face. A similar feat was accomplished at Philae. Before the high dam, the island was already partially submerged for several months each year by the waters of the older Lower Aswan Dam. The new dam threatened to drown it completely. Between 1972 and 1980, a cofferdam was built around the island and the water was pumped out. Every structure was carefully dismantled, block by block cleaned and transported to the nearby higher island of Agilkia, which had been landscaped to resemble the original setting of Philae. The temples were then painstakingly reconstructed in their original layout. This incredible undertaking ensured that the Pearl of Egypt would continue to shine for generations to come, a lasting symbol of international cooperation and our shared commitment to preserving the past. Scattered across the temple precincts of Egypt and the grand public squares of modern global capitals, a unique and striking form pierces the sky. The obelisk, a tall four-sided monolithic pillar that tapers to a pyramid-shaped top, is one of the most distinctive and symbolic creations of ancient Egyptian civilization. These were not merely architectural decorations. They were profound religious objects, powerful symbols of creation, permanence, and the all-important cult of the sun god Ra. To the ancient Egyptians, an obelisk was a tiken, a stone ray of the sun frozen in time and space, acting as a physical connection between the earthly realm of mortals and the celestial kingdom of the gods. They were monuments designed to capture the first and last light of day, sacred conduits of divine solar energy. The form of the obelisk is deeply rooted in the earliest creation myths of Heliopolis, the ancient city dedicated to the worship of the sun. It is believed to be an architectural evolution of the sacred Benben stone, a conical or pyramidal stone that represented the primeval mound, the first patch of dry land to emerge from the chaotic waters of creation. It was upon this mound that the sun god Atum-Ra was said to have first appeared to bring light and life into the world. The pyramidion, the small pyramid at the very top of the obelisk, was often sheathed in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, so that it would catch the rays of the rising and setting sun, creating a dazzling spectacle of light that must have seemed truly divine to onlookers. Obelisks were almost always erected in pairs, standing like monumental sentinels at the entrances to great temples. Their placement was highly symbolic, framing the gateway to the sacred realm and protecting it with their solar power. As the sun made its daily journey across the sky, the shadows cast by these twin giants would move across the temple courtyards, acting as immense sundials that marked the passage of time and the appropriate hours for rituals and offerings. They were physical manifestations of the stability and order that the sun god brought to the universe each day, their solid granite forms representing the permanence of the pharaoh's rule and the eternal nature of the gods they honored. The surfaces of these monoliths were not left bare. They were covered from top to bottom with intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions, celebrating the pharaoh who commissioned the monument and dedicating it to the glory of the sun god. These texts proclaimed the king's royal titles, his military victories, and his pious acts of temple construction, ensuring that his name and deeds would be forever associated with the life-giving power of the sun. To raise an obelisk was a supreme act of royal devotion and a powerful statement of the king's ability to command immense resources and perform incredible engineering feats, all in the service of honoring the most powerful deity in the Egyptian pantheon. The journey of every obelisk began hundreds of kilometers to the south of the great religious centers of Thebes and Heliopolis, in the granite quarries of Aswan. This region was the source of the hard, durable, and beautifully colored red and pink granite that was essential for creating these enduring monuments. The process of extracting a single flawless monolith, sometimes weighing over 400 tons from the living bedrock, was an immense challenge that required extraordinary skill, patience, and manpower. The ancient quarrymen could not simply blast the rock apart. They had to carefully and methodically free the giant stone from its matrix without creating any cracks or fissures that would render it useless after months or even years of labor. The technique they developed was a testament to their ingenuity and their deep understanding of the material. First, master craftsmen would identify a suitable, flaw-free section of granite. Then, using harder dolerite rocks, teams of workers would begin the long and arduous process of pounding out a narrow trench around the outline of the obelisk. This was grueling, repetitive work, as workers relentlessly bashed the dolerite pounders against the granite, slowly pulverizing it into dust. This process would continue for months on end, with teams working in shifts to carve out the sides and top of the massive stone block, leaving it attached to the bedrock only at its base. Once the obelisk was fully defined on three sides, the most critical and delicate phase of the operation began, detaching it from the bedrock below. To achieve this, the workers would cut a series of small slots or holes along the base of the monolith. It is believed that they then inserted wooden wedges into these slots and soaked them with water. As the wood absorbed the water, it would expand with incredible force, creating pressure that, combined with the stone's own immense weight, would hopefully cause a clean fracture along the desired line, freeing the giant block from the mountain. It was a moment of high tension, as a single miscalculation or hidden flaw in the rock could shatter the work of years. The Aswan Quarries today are a vast open-air museum of ancient industry, littered with the evidence of this colossal work. One can see the negative spaces where famous obelisks were born, the countless dolerite-pounding stones left behind by the workers, and the telltale marks of their extraction techniques on the rock faces. It was a process of decreation and recreation, where a piece of the sacred Egyptian landscape was carefully and laboriously separated from the earth. This raw block of granite, imbued with the strength and permanence of the mountains, was now ready to begin its long journey north, to be transformed into a polished, inscribed monument dedicated to the gods. Lying in the northern region of the Aswan Quarries is perhaps the most famous obelisk of all, one that was never finished and never left its birthplace. Known simply as the unfinished obelisk, this colossal monolith offers an unparalleled window into the methods and ambitions of the ancient Egyptian stonecutters. Had it been completed, it would have been the largest obelisk ever erected, standing at an estimated 42 meters tall and weighing a staggering 1,200 tons, almost 3 times the weight of any obelisk ever successfully raised. It lies there still, a silent testament to the sheer scale of pharaonic ambition and, honestly, the limits of their incredible technology. The obelisk, likely commissioned by the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, was abandoned in the quarry after a fatal flaw was discovered in the stone. As the workers were pounding it free from the bedrock, large cracks appeared in the granite, rendering the entire monolith structurally unsound and completely useless for its intended purpose. The decision to abandon the project must have been a devastating blow, representing a colossal waste of time, resources, and human effort. For archaeologists, however, this ancient failure is an invaluable gift. Because it was left in situ, it preserves every stage of the quarrying process, providing a life-size diagram of how these giants were hewn from the earth. Walking along its immense length, one can clearly see the trenches pounded out by the workers and the red ochre lines painted by the master craftsmen to guide their efforts. The sheer amount of rock that had to be pulverized to free the monolith is honestly breathtakingly evident. The unfinished obelisk allows us to calculate the size of the workforce required, the time it would have taken, and the precise techniques used in a way that no completed monument ever could. It is a frozen moment in the process of creation, capturing the industry, the organization, and ultimately the heartbreak of the ancient builders. It is a monument not to success, but to the process itself. The presence of this sleeping giant raises as many questions as it answers. How did the ancient Egyptians even plan to transport and erect a monolith of this immense size and weight? The failure of the unfinished obelisk may suggest that they were pushing the absolute boundaries of their technological capabilities, and perhaps in this case had overreached. It serves as a powerful reminder that even this highly skilled and ambitious civilization had its limits. The unfinished obelisk is therefore more than just a giant cracked stone. It is a profound lesson in ancient engineering, a memorial to the anonymous workers who toiled on it, and a symbol of ambition that was for once just too great. Once an obelisk was successfully freed from the quarry bed, the ancient Egyptians faced their next monumental challenge, transporting the massive block of granite, weighing hundreds of tons, from Aswan to its final destination at a temple in Thebes, or even further north, a journey that could cover over 800 kilometers. The only feasible way to move such an immense weight over such a distance was by water. using the mighty Nile River as a natural highway. This required not only a feat of heavy hauling to get the obelisk from the quarry to the riverbank, but also the construction of specialized watercraft capable of bearing such a colossal and honestly unprecedented load. First, the monolith had to be moved from its quarry bed down to the edge of the Nile. This was likely accomplished using a combination of human power, ropes, and wooden sledges. A path would be cleared, and a slipway, possibly lubricated with water or wet Nile mud to reduce friction, would be constructed. Hundreds, if not thousands, of workers would then pull the obelisk on its sledge in a slow, carefully coordinated effort. Reliefs from Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari actually depict this very process, showing a pair of obelisks being towed on a sledge by rows of men, a testament to the immense organizational power of the pharaonic state. The vessel designed to carry the obelisk was an engineering marvel in itself. It was an enormous barge, specially constructed to be strong and stable enough to support the concentrated weight of the monolith. Inscriptions from Hatshepsut's reign describe a barge nearly 100 meters long, built from native acacia and sycamore wood. The obelisk would be carefully loaded onto this massive vessel, possibly by digging a canal underneath the stationary obelisk and floating the barge into position beneath it. The loading process would have been incredibly precarious, requiring immense precision to ensure the barge remained balanced and did not capsize under the shifting weight. Once loaded, the great journey north would begin. The single barge carrying the obelisk was towed by a fleet of smaller towboats, manned by dozens of rowers. The reliefs show as many as 30 boats, with nearly 1,000 oarsmen in total, pulling the massive cargo vessel downstream against the prevailing northerly wind but with the river's current. This great flotilla would have been a spectacular sight as it made its way down the Nile, a majestic procession demonstrating the pharaoh's power to all the towns and villages along the riverbanks. The journey was a slow, majestic and perilous undertaking, a testament to the Egyptians' mastery of both engineering and navigation. After months of travel, the obelisk finally arrived at its destination. But the most mystifying and dangerous part of the process was yet to come, raising the monolith from a horizontal to a vertical position and placing it perfectly on its pedestal. This is perhaps the greatest of all the obelisk mysteries, as no definitive Egyptian records or reliefs have been found that clearly illustrate the exact method used. How did a society with no access to modern cranes or powerful machinery lift a fragile 400-ton stone needle and pivot it upright without it snapping under its own immense weight? The feat is so challenging that, honestly, modern engineers still debate the most likely technique. The most widely accepted theory involves the use of a massive earthen and sand-filled ramp. In this scenario, the obelisk would be dragged up a long, gentle ramp until its base was positioned directly over its prepared pedestal, which was located at the bottom of a deep pit or funnel-shaped structure. The workers would then begin to slowly and carefully remove the sand from the pit through specially constructed side tunnels. As the sand was removed, the base of the obelisk would gradually lower into the pit, causing the massive shaft to pivot upwards. Ropes attached to the top of the obelisk would be pulled by hundreds of men to guide its ascent and prevent it from toppling over. Another theory suggests a more direct method of leverage. This hypothesis posits that the ancient engineers built a large, temporary brick structure around the pedestal. The obelisk's base would be maneuvered into a notch at the bottom of the structure. Then, using a complex system of massive wooden levers, counterweights, and immense pulling power from thousands of workers with ropes, the obelisk would be slowly and painstakingly levered into an upright position. This method would have required an incredibly sophisticated understanding of physics and mechanics, as well as an abundance of strong timber, which, let's be honest, was a scarce resource in ancient Egypt, making it a challenging proposition. Regardless of the precise method, the final moments of the erection would have been incredibly tense. The obelisk had to be lowered perfectly onto its pedestal, a maneuver requiring millimeter precision. It is possible that a layer of sand was placed on the pedestal to allow for fine adjustments before being slowly brushed away to create a perfect fit. The successful raising of an obelisk would have been a moment of immense celebration and religious significance, a magical act where human ingenuity and divine will came together to plant a piece of the sun on Earth. The fact that they performed this feat repeatedly with such success remains, honestly, one of the greatest testaments to their engineering genius. While many obelisks still stand in their original homes at the temples of Karnak and Luxor, a significant number have, undertaken a second, much longer journey across the seas. Today, more obelisks stand in the city of Rome than remain in all of Egypt. These ancient stone needles have become silent ambassadors of a vanished empire, their towering forms gracing the public squares of Paris, London, New York, and Istanbul. Their presence in these foreign lands tells a story not of ancient Egyptian power, but of the fascination and desire of later empires to claim a piece of Egypt's monumental legacy for their own, a practice that actually began with the Romans. The Roman emperors were utterly captivated by Egyptian culture, and following their conquest of Egypt in 30 BC, they began to transport obelisks to Rome as trophies of their victory and symbols of their imperial power. Transporting these monoliths across the Mediterranean Sea was an even greater logistical feat than floating them down the Nile, requiring the construction of enormous specialized ships. The Emperor Augustus was the first to bring obelisks to Rome, erecting one in the Circus Maximus and another as the gnomon or pointer of a colossal sundial. Over the centuries, at least 13 obelisks were brought to the imperial capital, re-erected in circuses and forums as potent symbols of Rome's dominion over the ancient world. Centuries later, during the 19th century wave of Egyptomania that swept across Europe and America, a new scramble for obelisks began. In 1833, the obelisk that once stood before the Luxor temple was gifted to France and painstakingly erected in the Place de la Concorde in Paris, a marvel of modern engineering at the time. Not to be outdone, the British and Americans sought their own monumental souvenirs. An obelisk originally erected by Thutmose III, popularly known as Cleopatra's Needle, was transported to London and raised on the Victoria Embankment in 1878. Its twin was brought to New York City and erected in Central Park in 1881, after a perilous sea journey and a difficult overland trek through the city streets. These transplanted obelisks exist in a strange paradox. They have been removed from their original sacred context, where they were aligned with temples and the heavens, and have been reappropriated as secular monuments celebrating civic pride or military victories in foreign lands. Yet they have not lost their power to awe and inspire. They stand as tangible links to a distant and mysterious past, their hieroglyphic inscriptions speaking of pharaohs and sun gods in the heart of bustling modern cities. They are enduring symbols of a civilization whose grandeur continues to captivate the world, silent witnesses to the rise and fall of the empires that claimed them. The legacy of the Egyptian obelisk, born from the sacred Benben stone, extends far beyond the monoliths that were carried away to foreign capitals. Its elegant, powerful, and aspirational form has been copied and reinterpreted for millennia, becoming a fundamental element in the language of monumental architecture across the globe. From ancient Rome to the Renaissance and into the modern era, architects have drawn upon the obelisk's clean lines and upward thrust to commemorate great leaders, celebrate national triumphs, and mark sites of historical importance. The simple, potent symbolism of a single stone reaching for the sky has proven to be, honestly, timeless and universal. Perhaps the most famous modern heir to the Egyptian obelisk is the Washington Monument in the United States Capitol. Completed in 1884, it is the world's tallest obelisk, standing at over 169 meters or 555 feet. While it is constructed from marble blocks rather than being a single monolith, its form is a direct and deliberate homage to the ancient Egyptian Tekhen. It embodies the same principles of permanence, stability, and aspiration, serving as an enduring symbol of the nation and its first president. The Washington Monument demonstrates how the sacred geometry of the ancient Egyptians has been adapted to serve new secular, political, and commemorative purposes in the modern world. The obelisk form also continues to be used in smaller-scale memorials and cemetery monuments worldwide. Its association with eternity, resurrection, and the connection between earth and heaven has made it a fitting choice for funerary art. By choosing this shape, people are, maybe even unknowingly, tapping into a symbolic tradition that is thousands of years old, rooted in the ancient Egyptian obsession with overcoming death and achieving everlasting life. The obelisk's journey from a sacred solar symbol in a pharaonic temple to a common feature in a modern cemetery shows the incredible staying power of its fundamental design and meaning. Thus, the stone rays of the sun god Ra continue to shine across the world, long after the civilization that created them has passed into history. Whether standing in the ruins of Karnak, the center of a Roman piazza, or on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., the obelisk remains a powerful symbol of humanity's desire to create something permanent, to leave a mark that defies the passage of time. It is a testament to the genius of ancient Egyptian artisans and theologians who conceived of a form so pure and so potent that it would be revered, coveted, and copied for all of subsequent human history, an eternal legacy hewn from the heart of the earth itself. For the people of ancient Egypt, existence was not confined to a single lifetime spent along the fertile banks of the Nile. Their worldview was fundamentally dualistic, neatly divided into two distinct but interconnected realms, the world of the living and the world of the dead. Life on earth, with all its joys, labors, and sorrows, was seen as merely a temporary phase, a brief but crucial prelude to a much grander and more significant existence that awaited them after death. This core belief shaped every aspect of their culture, from the grandest state policies of the pharaoh down to the most private hopes and fears of the common farmer. The ultimate purpose of one's mortal life was to prepare for the journey into the next. This profound obsession with eternity was not born from a morbid fear of death, but rather from a deep love of life and a fervent desire for it to continue forever. The Egyptian afterlife was not imagined as a distant ethereal heaven, but as a perfected, idealized version of their own world. It was a place where the Nile's floods were always bountiful, the harvests were perpetually rich, and one could be reunited with beloved family members for all time. Death was therefore not an end, but a transition, a perilous but necessary passage from the transient world of the living to the eternal paradise known as the Field of Reeds. Every ritual, every prayer, and every tomb was part of a grand strategy to ensure this transition was successful. The Egyptians believed that each person possessed several spiritual components that were key to their survival after death. The Ka was the life force or spiritual twin, which required sustenance from offerings of food and drink to survive. The Ba was the individual's personality, often depicted as a human-headed bird which could travel between the tomb and the world of the living. For a person to achieve immortality, it was essential that the Ka and Ba could be reunited with the physical body after death. This belief was the driving force behind their most famous practice, the elaborate and sophisticated art of mummification, designed to preserve the earthly vessel for all eternity. This entire belief system was underpinned by the central concept of Maat, the divine principle of order, truth, justice, and cosmic harmony. The universe was a delicate balance between order and chaos, and it was the duty of every Egyptian, from the pharaoh to the peasant, to live a life that upheld Maat. A life lived in accordance with this principle was the best preparation for the final judgment that awaited every soul. The quest for immortality was therefore not just a matter of ritual and preservation, but also a deeply moral journey. It was a comprehensive approach to existence that integrated the physical and the spiritual, the mortal and the divine, into a single unified quest for an eternal life. The spiritual landscape of ancient Egypt was, honestly, just teeming with a vast and complex pantheon of gods and goddesses who, governed every aspect of creation and human existence. These deities weren't distant or abstract beings, but instead they were seen as active and powerful forces that manifested right in the natural world. The sun that crossed the sky each day was the god Ra, the life-giving Nile River was the god Hapi, and the sky arching above was the goddess Nut. This divine host, numbering in the thousands, really represented the Egyptians' attempts to understand and even influence the forces of nature that dictated their lives, from the fertility of their fields to the fate of their souls in the afterlife. At the head of this pantheon, especially during the New Kingdom, stood the sun god Ra, sometimes called Amun-Ra, the ultimate creator and sustainer of the universe. His daily journey across the sky in his solar bark was a potent symbol of the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Each night he would travel through the perilous underworld, battling the forces of chaos led by the serpent demon Apep, only to be, well, triumphantly reborn at dawn. This cosmic struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos, was really the central drama of Egyptian theology, and the rituals performed in the temples were meant to help Ra and ensure that the sun would rise again each day, thus preserving the cosmic order. Among the most beloved and honestly relatable deities were Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set, the central figures of a powerful myth of death and resurrection that resonated deeply with the Egyptian people. Osiris, the benevolent king of Egypt, was murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, the god of chaos in the desert. Osiris's devoted wife, Isis, painstakingly gathered his scattered body parts and, using her powerful magic, resurrected him long enough to conceive a son, Horus. Osiris then became the lord of the underworld, the ultimate judge of the dead. Horus grew up to avenge his father, defeating Set in a great battle and claiming his rightful place as the king of Egypt, becoming the divine model for all earthly pharaohs. This pantheon was not static. The importance of certain gods could rise and fall with the political fortunes of the cities where their cults were centered. The gods were worshipped in magnificent temples, which were considered their earthly homes. Here, a powerful priesthood performed daily rituals, clothing, anointing, and presenting offerings to the cult statues in which the gods' spirits were believed to reside. For the average Egyptian, access to the gods was more limited, expressed through personal amulets, small household shrines, and participation in the great public festivals that brought the gods out from their temples and into the streets, reinforcing the deep bond between the people and their divine protectors. In a society where the well-being of the nation really depended on maintaining favor with the gods, the priesthood held a position of immense power and responsibility. Priests and priestesses were the essential intermediaries between the mortal realm and the divine, the dedicated servants who performed the sacred duties necessary to uphold and ensure the continued stability of the cosmos. The pharaoh was, at least in theory, the high priest of every temple in Egypt. But in practice, he delegated this sacred authority to a highly organized and hierarchical clergy. These men and women were not just spiritual guides, they were scholars, administrators, and custodians of a tradition that stretched back for millennia. The primary duty of the temple priests was the performance of the daily cult ritual. This was not a public service, but a series of secret, sacred rites performed within the temple's inner sanctum. 3 times a day, the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies, break the seal on the shrine, and attend to the cult statue of the god. They would awaken the god with hymns, purify the statue with water and incense, anoint it with oils, and dress it in fine linen and precious jewelry. Finally, they would present a lavish meal of bread, beer, meat, and vegetables. The god was believed to spiritually consume the offerings, after which the food was reverted to the priests for their own sustenance, a system that made the priesthood economically self-sufficient. Becoming a priest required extensive education and adherence to strict rules of purity. Priests had to be physically unblemished and were required to maintain a state of ritual cleanliness. This involved shaving their entire bodies, washing several times a day in the temple's sacred lake, and wearing only pure white linen garments. There were different ranks within the priesthood, from the Wab or purification priests who performed lower-level duties, to the lector priests who were scholars and keepers of the sacred texts, up to the high priest, known as the first servant of the god, who held enormous political and economic influence. These roles were often hereditary, passed down from father to son for generations. Beyond their ritual duties, the great temples functioned as centers of knowledge and economic power, and the priests were the managers of these vast enterprises. They were astronomers who charted the stars to determine the timing of religious festivals, physicians who studied medicine, and scribes who copied and preserved sacred and scientific texts in the temple libraries or houses of life. The temples owned vast estates of land, and the priests oversaw the collection of taxes and agricultural produce, managing a significant portion of the nation's wealth. The priesthood was therefore the intellectual and administrative backbone of the pharaonic state, the guardians of both its spiritual and material prosperity. Of all the customs of ancient Egypt, none is more famous, or let's be honest, more fascinating than mummification, the sacred art of preserving the human body for eternity. This practice stemmed from the fundamental belief that the soul, needed to be able to recognize and reunite with its physical form in the afterlife. If the body decayed, the soul would be lost, and the chance for immortality would be gone forever. The Egyptians noticed that the hot, dry desert sand naturally preserved the bodies of the dead, and over centuries they developed this natural phenomenon into a highly sophisticated and ritualized scientific process designed to artificially preserve the body and transform the deceased into a divine being. The full, elaborate process of mummification, as perfected during the New Kingdom, was a lengthy and expensive procedure that took around 70 days to complete. It was carried out by specialized embalmers who possessed a deep knowledge of human anatomy and sacred rituals. The first and most critical step was the removal of the internal organs, which were the first parts of the body to decompose. A long hook was inserted through the nostrils to liquefy and remove the brain, which, interestingly, was not considered important. A small incision was then made on the left side of the abdomen to remove the stomach, intestines, liver, and lungs. The heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and emotion, was almost always left in place. Once the body was emptied, it was thoroughly cleaned and then packed and covered with natron, a natural salt compound harvested from the dry lake beds of the Wadi El Natrun. This powerful dehydrating agent would absorb all the moisture from the body's tissues over a period of about 40 days, preventing decay and bacterial growth. The removed organs were also dried in natron and were either placed in 4 special containers known as canopic jars, each protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus, or were wrapped and placed back inside the body cavity. The now shrunken and desiccated body was then ready for the final stage of wrapping. The wrapping process was a complex ritual in itself. The body was anointed with fragrant oils and resins and then meticulously wrapped in hundreds of yards of fine linen bandages. Priests would place magical amulets like the scarab beetle and the ankh between the layers of wrappings to provide protection for the deceased on their journey through the underworld. Spells and incantations from the Book of the Dead were recited at each stage. The finished mummy, now a stable and enduring vessel for the soul, was placed in a coffin or a series of nested coffins and was then ready for the final funeral rites and burial in its tomb, the eternal house for a transformed and divine spirit. Section 5. The journey through the underworld, navigating the Duat. For the ancient Egyptians, death was the beginning of a perilous and complex journey that every soul had to undertake. The destination was the paradise of the Field of Reeds, but the path led through the Egyptian underworld, a mysterious and dangerous realm filled with monstrous demons, fiery lakes, and gates guarded by terrifying supernatural beings. This was not a place of eternal punishment like the Christian concept of hell. Rather, it was a necessary landscape of trial and transformation that the deceased had to successfully navigate in order to be judged worthy of eternal life. The journey was a nightly ordeal, mirroring the sun god Ra's own perilous voyage through the underworld before his rebirth at dawn. There was imagined as a complex and highly structured realm, typically divided into 12 sections, representing the 12 hours of the night. Each hour presented a new set of challenges and required specific knowledge to overcome. The soul of the deceased, accompanied by gods and guided by magical texts, would travel by boat through this subterranean world They would encounter fearsome serpents, beings with knives for heads, and guardians who would demand to know secret names and passwords. Failure to provide the correct answers or recite the proper spells would result in the soul's annihilation, a second death from which there was no return, the most terrifying fate an Egyptian could imagine. To aid the deceased on this hazardous trek, their tombs were filled with magical equipment. Amulets of all kinds were placed on the mummy to provide specific protections: the scarab beetle for rebirth, the pillar for stability, and the Eye of Horus for healing and protection. Small figurines were included in the tomb by the hundreds. These were magical servants who were intended to come to life in the underworld and perform any manual labor required of the deceased, such as farming or irrigation, allowing the soul to rest and enjoy paradise. The deceased would magically activate them by reciting a spell from the Book of the Dead. The ultimate goal of the journey was to reach the Hall of Two Truths, the place of final judgment where the fate of the soul would be decided. This entire mythological landscape was a reflection of the Egyptian preoccupation with order and knowledge. They believed that the dangers of the unknown could be overcome with the proper preparation and the correct information. The elaborate tombs, the detailed funerary texts, and the complex mummification rituals were all part of a comprehensive strategy to equip the soul with everything it needed to conquer the chaos of the underworld and emerge like the sun god Ra, reborn and triumphant into the light of eternity. Section 6. The Book of the Dead, a Guidebook for the Soul. To navigate the treacherous landscape of the Ai, the ancient Egyptians did not leave the fate of their souls to chance. They equipped the deceased with a remarkable and complex collection of magical texts known today as the Book of the Dead. The ancient Egyptian title was, which translates more accurately as the Chapters of Coming Forth by Day. This name reflects its true purpose. It was not a book about death, but a manual for overcoming it. It was a divine guidebook, a collection of some 200 spells, hymns, and incantations intended to help the deceased overcome the dangers of the underworld and successfully achieve rebirth into the eternal afterlife. These texts were not a single, standardized book in the modern sense, but rather a customizable compilation of spells that a person or their family could choose from, depending on their wealth and preference. The spells were written by scribes on papyrus scrolls, which were then placed in the coffin or within the mummy's wrappings. The scrolls were often beautifully illustrated with colorful vignettes depicting the scenes and trials the deceased would face. These illustrations were just as important as the text, acting as a visual guide and magical aid for the soul, which was believed to be able to magically inhabit the scenes depicted on the papyrus. The spells within the Book of the Dead served a wide variety of purposes. There were spells to protect the deceased from monstrous demons and venomous snakes, spells to enable the soul to transform into different animals to bypass obstacles, spells to ensure the deceased would have air to breathe and water to drink, and spells that provided the secret names and passwords needed to pass through the guarded gates of the underworld. One of the most important spells was the one intended to be recited during the final judgment, the so-called negative confession, where the deceased would declare their innocence of a long list of sins before the gods. The Book of the Dead provides an unparalleled insight into the fears, hopes, and moral values of the ancient Egyptians. It reveals their belief in the power of knowledge and the written word to shape reality. For them, knowing the name of a demon gave you power over it, and being able to recite the correct spell at the right moment could mean the difference between eternal life and utter annihilation. This sacred collection of texts was the ultimate tool for survival, a magical and spiritual roadmap designed to ensure that the soul, armed with the proper knowledge, could confidently face the trials of the afterlife and emerge into the blissful light of the field of reeds. Section 7. The Final Judgment, the Weighing of the Heart. After successfully navigating the perilous journey through the underworld, the soul of the deceased arrived at its ultimate destination, the Hall of Two Truths, where it would face the final judgment. This was the most critical moment in the entire afterlife journey, a divine tribunal that would determine the soul's eternal fate. The ceremony, known as the Weighing of the Heart, was presided over by the great god Osiris, king of the underworld, who sat enthroned alongside a council of 42 other divine judges. The deceased would be led into the hall by the jackal-headed god Anubis, the divine embalmer and guardian of the scales. This was the moment of truth, where the deceased's entire mortal life would be scrutinized. The central act of the judgment was the weighing of the deceased's heart. The Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of a person's intelligence, conscience, and memory. It was the record of every deed, good and bad, performed during their lifetime. In the ceremony, the heart of the deceased was placed on one pan of a great golden scale. On the other pan was placed a single ostrich feather, the symbol of Maat, the goddess of truth, order, and justice. The scales would then reveal the true character of the deceased. The ibis-headed god Thoth, the scribe of the gods, stood ready with his palette and reed pen to record the result of the weighing. While the heart was being weighed, the deceased had to recite the negative confession, a series of declarations to the 42 judges proclaiming their innocence of a list of specific sins. They would state, "I have not committed sin, I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied," and so on. This was not a confession of guilt, but a powerful magical declaration of a life lived in accordance with. To ensure the heart would not betray them by revealing any hidden misdeeds, a special heart scarab amulet was often placed over the mummy's heart, inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead that implored the heart not to bear witness against the deceased. If the heart was lighter than or balanced perfectly with the feather, it meant the deceased had lived a righteous and balanced life. Thoth would record the favorable verdict, and Horus would lead the justified soul, now declared or true of voice, to be presented to Osiris. They would then be granted entry into the eternal paradise of the Field of Reeds. However, if the heart was heavy with sin and weighed down the scale, the verdict was damnation. The heart would be thrown to the floor to be devoured by Ammit, a terrifying composite monster with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This act would mean the second death, the complete and final annihilation of the soul's existence. For the soul that passed the final judgment, declared true of voice and worthy of eternal life, the ultimate reward awaited entry into the Field of Reeds, or Aru in ancient Egyptian. This was the Egyptian conception of paradise, a blissful and idealized reflection of the life they had known and loved along the Nile. It was not a distant, ethereal realm in the sky, but a tangible, fertile land where the sun always shone, the crops grew impossibly tall, and there was no sickness, no pain, and no sorrow. It was the ultimate fulfillment of the Egyptian dream, a perfect, unchanging version of their world that would last for all eternity. The Field of Reeds was imagined as a lush landscape of islands and waterways mirroring the fertile delta of the Nile. Here, the justified dead could enjoy all the pleasures of life without any of its hardships. Tomb paintings and funerary texts depict the deceased enjoying simple, idyllic activities, ploughing lush fields, harvesting bountiful crops of wheat and barley that grew to an immense height, sailing in small boats on the cool, clear waters, and playing a popular board game called Senet. It was a life of eternal leisure and abundance, a peaceful existence in the company of the gods, and reunited with beloved family members and friends who had also been judged worthy. Life in the Field of Reeds was not entirely one of leisure, however. The land still needed to be cultivated to provide sustenance for the deceased. This is where the magical figurines known as Shabtis played their crucial role. When the deceased was called upon to perform any manual labor, such as planting crops or digging irrigation canals, they would recite a spell to magically awaken their Shabti servants. The figurine would answer, "Here I am," and perform the task on behalf of its master. This clever provision ensured that the deceased could enjoy all the benefits of the land's eternal abundance without having to perform any of the toil themselves, living a life of perpetual aristocratic ease. Ultimately, arriving in the Field of Reeds represented the successful completion of the soul's long and difficult journey. It was the triumph of order over chaos, of life over death, and of morality over sin. Having navigated the dangers of the Duat and been vindicated by the scales of justice, the deceased was now a transformed divine being, able to dwell among the gods and enjoy an eternity of peace and plenty. This powerful and appealing vision of the afterlife was the driving force behind the immense effort and resources that the ancient Egyptians poured into their tombs, their rituals, and their mummies, all part of a grand, unified quest to secure a place in this perfect, everlasting paradise. To understand ancient Egypt is to understand the Nile. No other civilization in human history has been so completely defined and shaped by a single geographical feature. The Greek historian Herodotus famously and accurately called Egypt the gift of the Nile. For without this magnificent river, the land would be nothing but an uninhabitable extension of the vast Sahara Desert. Flowing north for over 4,000 miles from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea, the Nile carved a long, narrow and incredibly fertile valley through the barren wasteland. This ribbon of green, surrounded on both sides by endless desert, was the cradle of Egyptian civilization, the source of its wealth and the very foundation of its worldview, a sacred artery pulsing with the rhythm of life itself. The river was far more than just a source of water. It was the creator of the very land the Egyptians lived on. Every year, predictable summer monsoons in the Ethiopian highlands would swell the Blue Nile, sending a torrent of water northwards. This annual flood, known as the inundation, would overflow the river's banks and cover the adjacent floodplains. As the waters receded, they left behind a thick, rich layer of black silt, a natural fertilizer packed with minerals and nutrients. This miraculous annual deposit, which the Egyptians called Kemet, or the Black Land, renewed the soil's fertility year after year, allowing for bountiful agriculture that could support a large and prosperous population, a feat impossible in the surrounding red land of the desert. This annual miracle of renewal was so central to their existence that the Egyptians worshipped the Nile itself as a god. They called him Hapi, the deity of the inundation, often depicted as a plump figure with blue skin and large drooping breasts, symbolizing fertility and abundance. They held festivals in his honor and sang hymns of gratitude, praising him for bringing sustenance and prosperity to the land. The river was their clock and their calendar, its predictable cycles dictating the entire rhythm of their lives, from planting and harvesting to the timing of religious festivals. The Nile was not just a part of their world, it was the very center of their cosmos, the divine source from which all blessings flowed. The profound relationship between the Egyptians and their river shaped their entire outlook on life. The predictability of the Nile's flood instilled in them a deep sense of order, stability, and cyclical renewal. They saw the universe as a reliable and harmonious system, governed by the principle of Ma'at, or divine order. This optimistic worldview, born from the reliable generosity of the river, stood in stark contrast to the more volatile and unpredictable world of their Mesopotamian neighbors, who lived in fear of destructive, irregular floods. For the Egyptians, the Nile was a benevolent parent, a divine provider that guaranteed life and prosperity, the one constant in an otherwise harsh and unforgiving landscape. The life of every ancient Egyptian, from the pharaoh in his palace to the farmer in his field, was governed by the 3 seasons of the Nile. The Egyptian calendar was elegantly simple, directly reflecting the river's annual cycle. The year began with Akhet, the season of the inundation, which typically lasted from June to September. During this time, the Nile would swell and overflow its banks, submerging the farmlands in a vast shallow lake. All agricultural work came to a halt. For the farmers, this was not a time of disaster, but a period of waiting and renewal, as the life-giving waters deposited their precious layer of black silt, replenishing the land for the coming year of cultivation and growth. While the fields were underwater, the farmers were not idle. This period provided a large available labor force that the pharaohs could conscript for massive state-run building projects. It is no coincidence that the construction of pyramids, temples, and tombs often took place during the inundation season. Farmers would be called upon to quarry stone, haul blocks, and labor on these monumental structures, receiving rations of food and beer from the state in return for their service. This seasonal labor system was a key factor in the ability of the Egyptian state to create the architectural wonders that still awe the world today, turning a period of agricultural downtime into a time of immense national productivity. As the floodwaters began to recede around October, the second season, Pere, the season of growth, would begin. The land would re-emerge, now covered in a fresh, moist layer of incredibly fertile silt. This was a time of intense activity for the farmers. They would rush to repair their boundary markers, plough the soft earth with simple wooden ploughs pulled by oxen, and sow their seeds for the year's main crops, primarily emmer wheat and barley. The newly deposited silt was so rich that it required minimal effort to cultivate. The farmers would then manage a simple system of basin irrigation, trapping the floodwater in large diked pools to ensure their crops had enough moisture to grow throughout the season. The final season, which lasted from roughly February to May, was Shemu, the season of harvest. This was the driest time of the year, a period of hard work under the hot Egyptian sun. Men would move through the fields, cutting the ripe grain with wooden sickles set with sharp flint blades, while women and children followed behind, gathering the fallen stalks. The harvested grain was then taken to a threshing floor where it was trampled by donkeys or oxen to separate the grain from the chaff. After winnowing the precious grain, the staple of the Egyptian diet and the basis of its economy was carefully stored in granaries ready to feed the population and to be used as payment for taxes and wages until the next flood arrived to begin the cycle anew. The fertile black soil deposited by the Nile's annual flood was the foundation of Egypt's immense wealth and stability. This reliable agricultural surplus allowed the civilization to thrive for millennia, supporting a complex society of priests, soldiers, scribes, and artisans who did not need to produce their own food. The primary crops grown were grains, specifically emmer wheat, which was used to make the dense, hearty bread that was a staple of every meal, and barley, which was used both for bread and for brewing the thick, nutritious beer that was the national drink. Bread and beer were not just food and drink, they were the fundamental currency of the economy, used to pay laborers and officials for their work. Beyond the essential grains, the fertile fields and garden plots of Egypt produced a wide variety of other foods. Farmers cultivated an assortment of vegetables including onions, garlic, leeks, radishes, lettuce and cucumbers, which added flavor and nutrients to their diet. Legumes such as lentils and chickpeas were also important sources of protein. In irrigated gardens closer to the villages, they grew fruits like dates, figs and grapes. The grapes were primarily used for making wine, a luxury beverage enjoyed by the elite, while the common people consumed the sweet, energy-rich dates and figs, which could be easily dried and stored for consumption throughout the year. The Nile itself was also a crucial source of food. The river teemed with fish such as tilapia, catfish and perch, which provided a vital and readily available source of protein for the general population. Fishermen used nets, traps and hooks to catch fish, which were often eaten fresh or preserved by salting and drying in the sun, allowing for long-term storage. The dense papyrus marshes along the riverbanks were also a rich hunting ground. Here, nobles and commoners alike would hunt wildfowl, including ducks and geese, using throw sticks and nets. These hunting scenes are a common and vibrant motif in tomb paintings, depicting an idealized vision of the abundance provided by the river's ecosystem. The management of this agricultural bounty was a key function of the state. A vast bureaucracy of scribes meticulously recorded every aspect of production, from the size of the fields to the yield of the harvest. A significant portion of the grain produced was collected as taxes and stored in massive state-run granaries. This centralized control of the food supply gave the pharaoh immense power. It allowed him to feed the army, supply the workforce for his monumental building projects, and distribute food during times of famine, ensuring the stability and continuity of the kingdom. The granaries of Egypt were the true source of its power, the engine that drove the entire civilization. The Nile was not only the source of Egypt's agricultural life, it was also its primary highway, the vital artery of communication and transportation that bound the long, narrow country together. In a land with few roads, and where the desert was a formidable barrier, the river provided a convenient and efficient means of moving people, goods and ideas from the Nubian frontier in the south to the Mediterranean delta in the north. This ability to easily connect the different parts of the kingdom was crucial for maintaining political unity and centralized control over a territory that stretched for hundreds of miles. The river effectively made Egypt a single integrated nation. Travel on the Nile was made remarkably easy by a happy coincidence of nature. The river flows from south to north, so boats could simply drift downstream with the current to travel from Upper Egypt to Lower Egypt. The prevailing wind, however, blows from north to south. This meant that by raising a large, simple square sail, boats could be pushed upstream against the current to travel from north to south. This perfect combination of current and wind made two-way travel on the river both simple and reliable. The Egyptians became master boat builders, constructing everything from small personal rafts made of papyrus reeds to large wooden cargo barges and elegant royal vessels. This great riverine highway was essential for the Egyptian economy. Heavy and bulky goods that were difficult to move over land, such as grain from the farms, stone from the quarries, and imported timber from Lebanon, could be transported with relative ease on large cargo barges. The colossal granite blocks for obelisks and statues were floated from the quarries at Aswan all the way to Thebes and beyond. The river connected the major population centers, allowing for a vibrant trade network that distributed resources and finished goods throughout the kingdom. The Nile was the bustling main street of ancient Egypt, constantly alive with the traffic of commerce, administration, and daily life. The river was also the key to Egypt's military power and administrative efficiency. Armies could be rapidly deployed to any part of the kingdom to quell rebellions or defend the borders. The pharaoh and his officials could travel throughout the land on royal barges, inspecting projects, administering justice, and reinforcing their authority. Tax collectors used the river to reach provincial towns and collect the state's share of the harvest. Without the Nile as a unifying transportation route, it would have been nearly impossible for a single government based in Memphis or Thebes to effectively rule such a geographically elongated kingdom for 3,000 years. The river was the backbone of the state itself. For the vast majority of ancient Egyptians, life was a cycle of hard agricultural labor, dictated by the rhythm of the river. Farmers and their families lived in small, tight-knit villages built on higher ground to protect them from the annual flood. Their homes were simple structures made from mud bricks, a readily available material made from Nile mud mixed with straw and baked in the sun. These houses were designed to stay cool in the intense heat, with few windows and flat roofs where people could sleep during the hot summer nights. Family was the core of society, and most households consisted of a nuclear family, though extended relatives often lived nearby, creating a strong community network. The diet was simple but nutritious, based on the staples of bread and beer, supplemented by vegetables like onions and garlic and fish from the river. Meat was a luxury, typically reserved for festivals or for the wealthy elite. The people of the Nile were deeply religious, and their daily lives were filled with a belief in magic and the power of the gods. They wore simple linen clothing, which was well suited to the hot climate, with men wearing short kilts and women wearing straight sheath-like dresses. Both men and women wore makeup, particularly kohl eyeliner, which was believed to have magical protective properties and also helped to reduce the glare of the sun. While the farmers formed the base of the social pyramid, Egyptian society was highly stratified. Above them were the skilled artisans and craftsmen, the stonemasons, carpenters, potters, and weavers who produced the goods needed by the temples and the elite. These craftsmen often lived and worked in dedicated communities, such as the village of Deir el-Medina, home to the artisans who built and decorated the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They enjoyed a higher standard of living than the farmers and were highly respected for their skills, which were often passed down from father to son through generations of apprenticeship. At the top of the social hierarchy, just below the divine pharaoh, was a small, educated elite of nobles, high-ranking officials, and priests. The most influential group among them were the scribes, the literate administrators who formed the backbone of the government. They were the ones who recorded taxes, managed supplies, wrote letters, and copied the sacred and literary texts. The ability to read and write the complex hieroglyphic script was the key to power and social mobility. For the people of the Nile, society was a divinely ordered structure, as stable and predictable as the river itself, where everyone had a specific role to play in maintaining the harmony and prosperity of the kingdom. The story of ancient Egypt is a grand and sweeping epic, a narrative written not on paper, but carved into the very stone of the earth. The monuments that have survived the relentless passage of millennia are more than just archaeological relics. They are powerful messages sent across the vast expanse of time. Every pyramid that pierces the sky, every temple that stands in silent grandeur, and every obelisk that points towards the sun, tells us of a civilization that was profoundly preoccupied with the concepts of permanence, order, and immortality. They built not for a generation or a century, but for an eternity that they believed was their divine right and destiny, a future that they successfully shaped with their own hands. This enduring legacy is a testament to their unparalleled ambition and their incredible ingenuity. From the mathematical precision of the Great Pyramid to the artistic subtlety of a tomb painting, the achievements of the ancient Egyptians continue to challenge our understanding of what was possible for a Bronze Age society. They harnessed the power of a single river to create a stable and prosperous kingdom that lasted for 3,000 years, developing sophisticated systems of governance, writing, and religion. Their civilization was a complete cosmos, a world where science and faith were inseparable, and where every act, from planting a seed to building a tomb, was imbued with deep spiritual significance and purpose. The physical remnants of their world, from the colossal statues of Ramses the Great to the delicate gold mask of Tutankhamun, have become universal symbols of mystery and splendor. They have inspired countless generations of explorers, scholars, artists, and dreamers, fueling a global fascination that shows no sign of fading. The allure of ancient Egypt lies in this unique combination of the monumental and the personal. We are awed by the scale of their constructions, yet we are also moved by the intimate details of their beliefs about life, death, and the soul's journey. A journey they so meticulously prepared for with everything they had. Ultimately, the legacy of the pharaohs is one of triumph over transience. In a world where so many great cultures have vanished with barely a trace, ancient Egypt stands apart. They battled the forces of chaos and decay, not just in their mythology, but in their architecture and their rituals. They sought to arrest time itself to create a perfect and unchanging reflection of their world that would last forever, and in a very real sense, they succeeded. Their monuments still stand, their stories are still told, and their vision of eternity continues to hold a powerful grip on the human imagination, an indelible mark on our collective history. The ruins of ancient Egypt are not a silent landscape, they speak to us. They engage us in a profound dialogue with the past, offering lessons that resonate as powerfully today as they did thousands of years ago. The first and most striking lesson is one of human resilience and creativity in the face of immense challenges. They transformed an unforgiving desert into a thriving civilization, demonstrating a remarkable ability to adapt to and work in harmony with their environment. The Nile was their partner, not their adversary, and their success was built on a deep and respectful understanding of the natural rhythms that governed their world, a lesson in sustainability that is more relevant now than ever. The stones also teach us about the power of a shared vision and collective purpose. The construction of the pyramids and temples was not the work of oppressed slaves, as once thought, but of a dedicated and organized community united in a common cause. These monumental projects were an expression of a unified national identity and a deep-seated faith. They show us what can be achieved when a society is mobilized towards a single, ambitious goal. It is a reminder that the greatest achievements of humanity are often not the result of individual genius alone, but of the coordinated effort and shared belief of many thousands of people working together. Furthermore, the world of the pharaohs provides us with a powerful reflection on the human quest for meaning. Their entire civilization was built around a sophisticated framework of beliefs that sought to answer the fundamental questions of our existence. Where do we come from? What is our purpose? And what happens after we die? Their elaborate preparations for the afterlife, from mummification to the writing of the Book of the Dead, were all part of a courageous attempt to confront and conquer the finality of death. Their story reminds us of the universal human need to believe in something larger than ourselves, to seek a sense of order and purpose in a sometimes chaotic universe. As we walk in the shadow of the colossi and decipher the hieroglyphs on temple walls, we are humbled. The sheer age and permanence of these structures put our own fleeting lives and concerns into perspective. They are a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the human drive to create a legacy that outlasts a single lifetime. They teach us that while empires may fall and languages may be forgotten, the fundamental aspirations of humanity for security, for meaning, for a connection to eternity, remain unchanged. The stones of Egypt remind us that we are part of a much longer story, a continuous human journey that began long before us. For all that we have learned, ancient Egypt continues to guard its deepest secrets. For every tomb we have opened, another lies hidden beneath the sands. For every hieroglyph we have deciphered, another contains symbolic meanings that still elude us. The land of the pharaohs remains a landscape of profound and enduring mystery. The questions surrounding the construction of the pyramids, the true purpose of the Sphinx, and the precise knowledge of their priest astronomers persist, fueling endless debate and speculation. This element of the unknown is not a failure of our understanding, but is in fact a vital part of Egypt's eternal appeal. It is a puzzle that may never be completely solved. This sense of mystery ensures that the journey of discovery is never over. Each new generation brings fresh eyes and new technologies to the investigation, peeling back the layers of time to reveal new insights. Ground-penetrating radar can now hint at hidden chambers, DNA analysis can uncover the secrets of royal lineages, and advanced imaging techniques can reveal faded details on ancient papyri. The story of ancient Egypt is not a static history written in a book. It is a dynamic and ongoing investigation, a thrilling detective story played out across millennia with new clues and new revelations constantly emerging from the desert sands. The true magic of ancient Egypt is that it allows us to dream. It is a world where the lines between history, mythology, and magic become beautifully blurred. It invites us to wonder about lost knowledge, hidden treasures, and the possibility that this ancient civilization was even more advanced than we currently believe. This sense of wonder is a precious gift. It sparks our imagination, encourages us to ask big questions, and pushes the boundaries of our knowledge. Egypt is not just a subject for academic study, it is a source of inspiration, a catalyst for curiosity that enriches our modern world in countless ways. And so the land of the pharaohs will continue to captivate us, forever drawing us back to its sun-baked plains and its majestic river. It is a journey without a final destination, a story without a final chapter. The monuments they left behind are not the end of their story, but an eternal invitation for us to begin our own exploration. As long as the pyramids stand against the horizon and the Sphinx stares into eternity, the world will continue to look towards Egypt with a sense of awe and wonder, forever seeking to unravel its secrets, rediscovering its magic again and again. The eternal mystery is its greatest